Okay. I know I said last week that I had an important announcement to make this week, but I'm just kidding. Chill out. I was jokingly accused last week of doing a bait and switch, so I'm not going to do that this week. If you're new here, this is your first time with us this Sunday. I spent like 5 weeks telling our church to be here, right? You know, clear their calendars, hop on a plane and fly home if you need to, but be here for this series. Now everybody knows that was not just an intentionally vague call to action. That's actually the title of the sermon series, because it is in many ways, it's the vision I'm trying to share in this 4-week series. So to put it simply, we are living in a cultural moment where churches are dying by the hundreds every day. And so our vision is that 25 years from now, we'd be here. Right? And that vision's anchored in the fact that we think the church needs, or the world needs the church. Right? For the world's flourishing, it needs people who actually believe that all things are from God and through God and to God. But the world needs people who function, like Jesus said, like salt and light. But the world needs people who are safeguarding, preserving, like salt, things that are good and true and right and beautiful. But the world needs people who can function like a lighthouse in a dark place, right? To help people navigate their way home to God. Jesus seemed to think that the world would be a dark and self-destructive place if it were not for his followers in the world. So we think the world needs the church. But more than that, I suggested that our particular world needs churches like ours. And that is not in any way to try to, be, exceptionalism. It's simply to say we're living in a unique moment. The reason that churches are dying by the hundreds every day is because people are finding it harder and harder to live authentically as Christian people. They're deconstructing Christian faith. And they don't sense that there are places where they can go and learn how to reimagine what it means to be a Jesus follower in the world. And there are very few churches in the world that are able to help people engage that journey successfully. But that's kind of the niche we've carved out for ourselves over the last 10 plus years. So for us, we think we're kind of uniquely suited for this moment we're living in. So it's not just that the world needs the church, but that maybe this particular world needs churches like ours. So 25 years from now, we want to be here, plain and simple. We want to be here. But for that to happen, we got to take the next step in our kind of organizational journey, right? We've spent the last 10 years, well, really the last 25 years, we'll talk more about that in a couple weeks, building what we think is a unique and compelling culture. We think there's something special going on here. So now it's time to grow. It's time to grow. If we don't grow, we will die at some point. It's time to grow. But in order to grow, you got to have more than just a unique and compelling culture. You've got to add to that culture infrastructure that like a trellis to a vine can provide the physical supports that the culture can grow up in and through and around. So that's the step that we need to take as a church in this next season of our shared life together. A big part of that infrastructure is going to be internal. It's people stuff. It's programs, it's structures, it's systems, it's procedures, it's metrics. It's the kind of stuff that a lot of you, your eyes just glaze over. Oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about any of that. And we get that. But infrastructure is also external. It's not just people and programs, it's blacktop and shingles and drywall. Right? You can't detach conversations about being here from the physical structure that allows us to be here, that gives being here shape and function. So today, I want to talk about the potential future of our building, specifically, as it relates to our potential future as a church. Okay, so here's the down and dirty. This is a 25-year-old building, and in the next 6 to 8 months, we are going to have to spend an enormous amount of money on some repair work. We've got to replace our entire roof. We also have to replace several of our HVAC units. Our estimates right now are that those repairs are going to cost north of $120,000. And then much further down the road, we're going to have to talk about windows and doors and flooring and all of those sorts of things, right? These are just the expenses associated with having a space that is essential for the church to be the church, because the church is an embodied gathering. So we are going to incur those expenses no matter what. But just like any homeowner would, before making a significant investment in a home, they would ask the question, do we think we're going to live here for 25 more years? Because if we're not going to live here for 25 more years, we're not going to recoup the investment. We're better off putting the house on the market and pass the expense on to the next homeowner. So our leadership team has been looking at our building and saying, do we see ourselves living in this building for the next 25 years? We don't want to just dump a huge sum of money to make repairs if this is not the building that's going to see us through the next 25 years. So for months, we've been reflecting on that question. Is this the building we see ourselves living in for another generation of church life together? And the simple answer is no, it's not. If we're going to be in this place, 8217 Dutch Road, if we're going to be in this place 25 years from now, it's not going to be in this space. At least not as it exists right now. I've been here 11 years. And in that 11-year time period, we've seen our church population kind of swell and recede, hovering right around that 200, 300 person attendance mark. One of the reasons we haven't been able to sustain growth, which is the kind of growth we need if we're going to build an institution that's going to be here 25 years from now, is that our physical ceiling, our building, is something of a growth ceiling. If we don't address it, it's going to continue to function that way. And it's not just a size thing. Size is part of it. I'm framing this in terms of story. The reason our building is a growth barrier is because of the story that it tells. Like, buildings tell a story. Intentionally or unintentionally, buildings communicate who you are or who you aspire to be. And because we spend 90% of our lives inside buildings, the story that a building tells has a pretty significant influence on our own self-narrative. And you all know this. This is one of the reasons that we're kind of critical about spaces. Because before we ever walk into a space, we're already evaluating whether or not the story that building tells is a story that I want to associate my story with. We're already asking questions like, do I want to go in there? Do I think that place is safe? Can I imagine myself in that space? Do I see myself there? Do I look forward to being there? I remember this was years ago. Carrie and I were working with a realtor looking for our very first home. And she would, take us around and show us different places. I remember pulling up to this one property. We get out of the car, and before we took 2 steps, Carrie leans over to me and says, "Please don't make me live here." It's just the reality, and we all do this. We all do this. Buildings tell stories, and we are always, all the time, reading and interpreting the stories we think they're telling and making decisions about whether or not we want to associate ourselves with those stories. As I walk through some things this morning, I want you to think critically about the story this building tells. What story does it tell? To people who aren't here. We obviously have some issues, and I'm going to run through a few, and none of them are going to surprise any of you if you've spent more than 5 minutes here. We have some size limitations in this building. That's not actually in this room. In this room, there are 265 seats. Right now, we're averaging about 200 people, a little more than that, across 2 services. So the size of this room, for now, is actually okay. We've got some room to grow into this room. The size of this room has actually never been the issue up till now. It's the size of the rest of the building. This space can accommodate some growth. The rest of the building cannot. That begins in our kids area, which may not surprise you. Maybe it will. You just watched a whole train of young people walk out of this room. Many of you, I'm sure you look at that and you think, that's amazing. What a blessing it is to have a church with all these kids in it. But if you're not serving back there, or if you don't have kids in our kids ministry program, you probably do not appreciate what a challenge it is to serve those kids and their families as well as we want to and as well as we can in our existing space. Our existing kids space can accommodate about 75 kids per any one service. We have a lot more than that. Now, we've given ourselves a little breathing room because we've moved to 2 services, but it's still pretty tight. We don't have enough classrooms, and the classrooms we do have are not always the best size to certain populations. Dana mentioned having 20 preschoolers in one room. It's not uncommon for us to have a dozen kids in our nursery. And because we're not an actual school where people enroll, we don't have the luxury of enrollment numbers. Every Sunday, we have no idea. We could have 30 kids. We could have 115. Our kids area actually didn't exist when the building was first constructed. It was added later. It was a necessary step. It served us for a while. It's not big enough. It's not big enough, and it doesn't function well enough for the church we currently are. So we certainly cannot grow anymore. I can say the same thing about our bathroom spaces. We don't have enough of them, and they're not large enough. And do we need to talk about the lobbies? I think every single person in this church has said, Mike, the lobbies are so loud. I just can't hear anything. I can't be. We get it. The lobbies are supposed to function as multi-use gathering spaces. You want to be able to walk out of church and sit and hang out and have a conversation. Our lobbies are too small, they're too cramped, and they're too loud for that to happen. I mean, they are, for all intents and purposes, they are wasted square footage. We can't do much with either of them. So we have some size problems that will prevent us from actually being able to maximize the size of this room. In addition to size issues, we have some security issues. 25 years ago, security was not a big deal. People didn't think much about it when it came to public spaces. But that is different today. That expectation has changed. Again, that starts with kids' spaces. Just think of the changes that school systems have had to make in the last decade. Like it or not, if people are going to entrust their kids to you, they expect those spaces to be safe and secure. Our kids' space is not secure from the rest of the building, including it does not have its own designated bathroom space. It might not bother you that little Johnny has to borrow bathroom space with some grown man he's never seen before, but to the average adult in our culture, that's a little unnerving. We do not have a good, clear, central entrance and exit. We have lots of entrances and exits, much to the chagrin of our security people. Our office, which is the space that's occupied all week long, is at the far end of our building, visually detached from everything. That's not ideal. Again, 25 years ago, people didn't think about that or care, and we probably have gotten used to it like any person who's lived in a house for a while. It doesn't matter a whole lot to us, but it has become the sort of cultural expectation. So we got size issues, we got security issues, we've got some traffic flow layout problems. When you first walk through the front doors, our building does not intuitively direct traffic. In fact, we've had to train, and you know this if you're one of our greeters, we've had to train our greeters to give new people crack. It's an acronym. It stands for Coats, Restroom, Auditorium, Coffee, Kids. Because when you walk in the front door, nothing's intuitive. Where do I go? And what you may not appreciate is that if a person is going to take the risk to come to a new church, that is a really intimidating experience, and you make that a lot worse when you walk in the front door and my first emotion is, oh God, where do I go? Our lobbies create that experience for people. A third of our building is at the end of a long, scary hallway that says, please don't come down here. In fact, many of you have no idea what's down there because you've never been down there. We have people that will come to our church and be here for years and literally never go to the end of that hallway. If you are a new person who comes into this space and you happen to get over your initial discomfort and one of the greeters says, oh yeah, coffee, restroom, oh, I see you have some kids, you check them in. You mosey your way into the coffee lobby, it is very possible that you will get lost in the Bermuda Triangle that is where all three of those areas converge in one location. And we have actually lost people there. New people have come to church, gone in there, and we've never seen them again. We have no idea where they go. Okay, 25 years ago, none of this mattered. You did the church thing in this room, and then you walked down the scary hallway, and you did the potluck thing down there, and things were compartmentalized, just like houses were built 25 years ago. Today, that's not the expectation. The expectation is that things kind of connect, and they flow intuitively from one space to another. Our lobbies obviously do not facilitate that kind of inviting interconnectedness. And that's an issue for some people. And we've obviously got some aesthetic issues. Let's just name it, okay? From the seizure-inducing wallpaper in the women's restroom to the original carpet and chairs still in the auditorium to the bricolage of tile and stone and brick and carpet and color, all of which have been added at different times over the years to try and integrate this place. But because it's all been done sort of piecemeal, it's kind of made things worse, not better. Like, we need to bring our building into the common era, let alone the current era. Okay. Buildings tell a story, gang. They do. And I've said this to people, if we were missionaries in some foreign country and we were looking to plant a church in some culture that we didn't know and that we didn't understand, we would ask questions like this. We would say, okay, we're going to put a church up. What is the world that people understand here? What matters to them? What language do they speak? What are their expectations? And we would mold and we would shape our physical structure around whatever those cultural norms are, because you don't really have any other choice. We live in a world where our buildings tell a story, and in a sort of HGTV culture, people are just a lot more critical of spaces. Before they ever walk in, they're asking questions. Do I even want to be in there? What story does that building tell? None of that happens consciously, but it's going on subconsciously all the time. You know this. You know there are doctors' offices and restaurants and schools, and there are places you will never go. You have absolutely no knowledge of what's going on inside of those spaces. You just will never go there because of what they look like. We have to be honest about the story that our building tells. Do you think our building, right now as it exists today, does it tell people? Does it tell people the story that we're trying to tell internally? Does it say to people that we think God is beautiful and worth everything in your life? Does it tell that story? Or does it tell, the size and the security and the functionality and the aesthetics and all the stuff? Does it tell a story like those people don't know who they are? There's no life in that place. They don't care. They're stuck in the past. I would never meet God there. Those people don't speak my language. They don't understand what my life is like. I think we have to be honest that may be the story that our building tells. And like it or not, that's what creates the physical ceiling as growth ceiling. This building has been a gift. It has carried us for 25 years. I am so grateful to the people who put in that wallpaper and this carpet as much as I take jabs at it. But they were a different people, and that was a different time. If we don't make changes to the physical infrastructure that is this building, it will prevent us from becoming the church we need to be if we want to be here 25 years from now. So today I'm proposing we make a change to our building. We see ourselves 25 years from now in this place, but not in this space, not as it exists today. So we want to make some changes. Changes that I think will tell a better and truer story. Changes that will address all the ways that our current structure limits us that I just talked about, will set us up better to engage our core functions of worship and community, ministry, and learning. Changes that I think will be a tangible witness to the community that we live in, that we intend to be here, and that we're making space for them to be here too. Changes that honor the people who came before us by saying we're willing to make similar sacrifices to the one you made. It changes that make God and actually participating with God and God's work in the world a priority, a true priority in our lives, tangibly, materially. You want to see what it could look like? Next 25 years? Come next week, that's right. Man, that'd be awful, wouldn't it, Jerry, if I did that to you? Okay, hey, this is one step, one necessary step, but this is what it could look like for you, for your kids, for your grandkids, and for people in our community to be here for the next 25 years, okay? Okay, I didn't give people a chance to react. Oh, are you going to clap? Was somebody going to clap? Yeah, thank you. Sheila, thank you. We can always count on you for that. Okay, I know that we've been living in this for months. Some of you, that is the first time you've seen that, and you had absolutely no way of knowing the scope of what I've been talking about. So I understand that this is going to hit all of us in very different ways, okay? So I don't intend for you or expect anybody to have a kind of initial sort of gut reaction. Let me point out a few things to you about this project. When we entered into this, the design priorities were very clear. Priority number one was an expanded kids' worship space that was secure with designated bathrooms. That was our top priority. The second was a new lobby entryway third space that could function like a traffic artery for the building, but could also be a multi-use gathering space, especially on Sundays. And then, of course, it was to aesthetically give the whole structure an update, right? To integrate it, bring it together, modernize it, right? So to do that, we started with the lobby. That was the space that led to all other spaces. So we took out the existing bathrooms and junior high classroom, and we blew out the east wall center of the building, and we added 2,500 square feet of new construction. It's the only new construction in the whole project. So that now you'll get a large open-air central lobby space that solves our traffic flow issues. So from 2 feet inside this main entryway, you can see all of the other spaces in the building from left to right. A brand new bathroom spaces, auditorium entrance, a connection area, our office wing, the kids' check-in area and entrance, and then a hospitality sitting area, all right with inside the front doors. So this is the space that you have to go through to get to all of the other spaces. And because of its size and its dimensions, so it's large open air in the middle, but we've also intentionally created these lower ceiling dimensions on the sides. It'll solve our noise issues, but it'll also function as a true multi-use space. We'll be able to use this for a lot of different things, especially gathering on a Sunday morning and being able to just hang out together. Once we made that change, we were then able to create a brand new kids worship wing right off of our central lobby. So imagine going down to the end of the scary hallway. That door now butts right into the brand new lobby space. That's your secure entryway into your new kids wing. We're expanding the kids area from right now about 1,900 square feet to about 4,700 square feet. So kids are going to feel like their space well over doubled in size. We're increasing the number of classrooms that we have. We're increasing the size of each individual classroom. And then we're adding certain designated spaces like bathrooms. We have a sensory room for children with special needs. We've added a storage room. And then we've also included inside of it a large multi-purpose gathering worship space. So for kids on Sunday, that will serve as a worship space for them. Not that they won't be in here with us anymore, but it allows them to have their own kind of large multi-use space. That space will also continue to serve as a community room space for the rest of our church every other day of the week, just like our current community room does, so we don't lose that functionality. Then the plan is to take the office wing, relocate it to the center of the building where our kids' classrooms currently are, so that it's got direct line of sight to the front door, easy access to all of our visitors. And then, of course, you saw the images of what the inside of and outside of the building could look like. Doesn't mean it will look exactly like that. That's just to give you a picture of the way that we might aesthetically integrate the space. Okay? I know what you're thinking. Okay? You're thinking, Mike, if this building is so great, if it's everything that you tell us it's going to be, why is that teenager in the front lobby so angry? Did you notice him when you went through? Vicky saw it, right? Look, I don't know. I can't tell you. Okay? It's a season. You know, guys, teenagers can be angry people. I think it has something to do with I want to be my own person and make all my own decisions, but mom still treats me like a kid, and I can't explain it. I'm just kidding. I know what you're thinking. You want to know what all of these changes are likely to cost. Our commercial contractor is estimating that these renovations will cost $1.7 million. Now, that's a conservative estimate, and what I mean by conservative is that's like from their perspective, that's a worst-case scenario number. Now, I know that number is going to hit us all in different ways. Some of you, you're going to hear that number, and you're going to think, oh, well, I guess we're not doing that. And some of you are going to hear that number, and you're going to think, wow, that is surprisingly low. I was expecting way more. Okay, projects like this are supposed to bring a church together and propel it into a better future. But because of the very different ways all of us are going to respond to this, and more importantly, because of how leadership often responds to those responses, projects like this can end up doing the exact opposite. So next week, be here, I'm going to talk about the cost of this project head on. We're going to talk about the worth of this project. And I want to do that directly and honestly so that those negative unintended consequences of projects like this don't happen to us. What I will say now, okay, what I will say now to you, doing what needs to be done to this building to set us up for another generation of life and ministry together is not going to be easy, and it is not going to come without sacrifice. If you look at the whole can be paralyzing. Chances are there's not one person in the room who is going to be responsible for the whole. So better to think about your potential part of the whole. For something like this to happen, every one of us, and we're going to talk about this directly, every one of us will have to give sacrificially relative to our wealth, relative to what we have. For some people, that's going to mean they give a lot more. For other people, it's going to mean they give less. But if everybody in the family chooses to give sacrificially relative to what God has given them, everyone is effectively engaging in the same way. And I think you'll find out we've got enough to get it done. But we're going to talk more about that next week. Okay. Some disclosure as I close. I've been here 11 years. I'd like to be here till I retire. I think we've got something special here. And I recognize I am a salesperson at heart. Like I am the kind of person that can sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves, right? And I know that. And I know that as I stand on this stage and I talk about this, I know that I am leveraging a very sacred office. And I'm just acknowledging that. I can't help but try to sell you on this, because when I look at my own life, my own professional life, I look at this and I think this is something we need to do. It's something I want to do. I see us in this space. I want to spend the next season of my professional career engaged in this. In fact, I can see how doing this scripts the next 15 years of our life together. So I want to do it. And I just need to be honest with you about that. Having said that, this is not my decision to make. This is our decision to make. If this is going to happen, it's going to happen because corporately we come together to make it happen. And because it'll take all of us to make it happen, we all have to be involved in the process of discerning whether it can or should happen. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the church in Rome, he tells the Roman Christians, he says, don't conform yourself to the pattern of the world, but instead, let God transform you by changing the way you think. That is a process I feel like we've been on for a very long time. I have watched over and over and over again how God has transformed people's lives by challenging the way they think about things, the way they think about Him as their God, the way they think about themselves and other people and what's happening in the world. We have been on the journey of letting God challenge the way we think and changing our lives for a long time. It's interesting that Paul goes on to say, then you'll be able to test and approve what God wants you to do. If you are the kinds of people who are committed to letting God constantly transform you by changing the way you think about things, Paul says that's the necessary groundwork for you to be able to understand what God would have you do in your life, or for us to be able to do anything together. We need to discern what God would have us do. So from my perspective, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is just another opportunity for us to grow in faith and to grow in faithfulness, to let God continue to challenge us and work on the way that we think about things so that we can grow spiritually. And I'm excited about that. So that process of corporate shared discernment's got to start today. So your leadership team has been working on this for months. I'm bringing this in front of you and I'm saying I need you to get involved in the process. If we're going to do this at some point in the not too distant future, our leadership community is going to have to say go, no go for launch. In order to make that decision, every one of you, you're going to have to answer two questions in your life. You're going to have to answer for yourself. Do you think we should do this? And if the answer to that question is yes, what kind of investment are you prepared to make? I recognize that in order for you to ask and answer those two questions, you probably have some questions of your own. There's probably some information that you would like to gather. You may have some concerns that you would like to share, ideas that you would like to contribute. We need to hear those. That we have to do that together. So starting today, I'm asking you to do two things. One, I'm asking you to pray. I'm asking you to take a hot second every day of your life to say a prayer for our church. Not that we would or wouldn't do this, but that together we will be able to discern what God would have us do and how we're supposed to do it. And that there would be a sense of unity and shared energy behind it. Say a prayer for our church every day. And then get involved. So today, there is a page on our website, watervillecc.org/behere. You can go there. You can rewatch the video that you saw this morning, because I know it went fast. You can look at all the still images of the project. You can scrutinize the floor plan. You can see all the before and afters. They're all there. I want you to do that. I want you to go home, and I want you to spend time this week looking at these things, having conversations. When questions come up, write them down. Concerns you might have, write them down. Ideas you want to contribute, write them down. We need to hear all of those things. Starting next week, after both services on November 13th and November 20th, members of our building committee, who I will introduce to you next week, will be holding town hall meetings down in our community room. They are the first of many. This is not the only space for this. It's just the first space for this. We're inviting you after service. You spend this week. We want to kind of get initial reactions. Spend this week looking at stuff, having conversations. Nothing's off limits. If you got to ask it, ask it. If it's a concern you have, raise it. Starting next week, if you can, make time to stick around after the service that you attend and share those things with members of our building committee. Again, that'll be the first of many of those spaces. We will also have a digital feedback tool that'll be on our website starting next week on that same building page. So if you can't make an in-person meeting, or you're the kind of person that you feel more comfortable sharing your thoughts from a distance, that tool will be there. Get on our website, fill it out, submit it. We will take all of those questions, all of those concerns, all of that feedback, and our team will work on those, and over the coming weeks and months, we will figure out how to create feedback loops, right? So that your questions get answered, your concerns get addressed. And I'm confident if we engage in that process in a healthy way, then we'll get to the end of it with a pretty good sense of whether we actually should do this or not. At the risk of sounding manipulative, I got up this morning, I was spending time with Jesus, and in my own reading, I just use lectionary passages. So these are passages I don't choose for myself. The church has chosen them for us. So I opened up my Bible today, and I read a passage from the prophet Haggai, which I'm sure you all know really well. Haggai's talking to the Israelites after they've returned from exile. So they get punished by God, and they go into exile, and then they come back. And they're faced with the daunting task of whether they should rebuild their building, their temple. And it's an overwhelming idea. They're overwhelmed by the whole prospect of it. And the prophet Haggai looks at them and says, "Get to work. I, the Lord, am with you." Now, I read that and I thought, oh, all right, the Lord's with us. This is happening. We're going to do this, right? I don't know if that's true, but I can at least say this. We do need to get to this work, the work that's in front of us, the work of discernment. We got to get to that work. And the Lord will be with us in that work, and I'm confident that as we process through that together we'll know what we need to do. Okay? I'm going to end by saying this. This is not about a building. This is not about a building. Remember that. This is about a group of people discerning the need to be here 25 years from now. And part of that vision is discerning the investment we need to make in our building, because the building's a necessary tool for us to be here and for us to do what we do as a church. Right? I'm grateful for this place. As much as I jab at it, I'm grateful for the wallpaper and the carpets. But that was a different people in a different time. It fell to them to construct it. I think it falls to us to renovate it if we're going to be here 25 years from now. So pray with me, and get involved so that together we can discern if this is a step in the story that God would have us tell here. Amen? Okay, all right. I'm going to invite you to stand. We're going to finish our service by taking communion together. We participate in this sacrament every Sunday with one another. This is our sacrament of remembrance. It's our moment every Sunday as a group of people to say, this is who our God is, a God who breaks his own body and sheds his own blood for the world he so loves. And as we take those elements, into our system, we become part of that story. Like we're people who go out into the world to love like God has loved us. If you're new here, we invite you to join us. You want to follow Jesus this week as best you can, come to the table. Make that who you are. Okay? Our communion tables are here on the side of the stage. I'm going to invite you to start from the back row to come forward. You can grab those prepackaged elements and then return to your seat using the side aisle. Let me pray for us. God, we thank you that you have been so good to us. Thank you for providing for us and sustaining us for 25 years. We faced the daunting, intimidating task of taking a big step in our life together. And it's scary, so we pray. We pray for your wisdom. Help us to discern what you would have us do. We want to be here. We want to be here for the world you so love, and we'll do what we need to do for that to happen. So we trust you to continue to do a work in us to shape us into the kinds of people who can love this world the way you do. We entrust ourselves to you this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
You hold the reins on the sun and the moon, like horses driven by kings. You cover the mountains, the valleys below, with the breath of your mighty wings. Treasures of wisdom and things to be known are hidden inside of your hand. And in this fortunate turn of events, you ask me to be